Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys are all doing well. As most of you guys know, right now is a pretty terrible time to build a gaming PC. Pricing is pretty high and availability is super low, especially on the parts that really determine the performance of your system, like the graphics cards. All graphics cards are super expensive right now. So today I kind of wanted to put together a build that someone could kind of go into and get some decent value from it, but really just kind of set themselves up for the future when they will be able to get these parts for reasonable pricing, or if they're willing to wait within like a queue or something like that in order to get non-scalped pricing. This is kind of what this PC is for. Now, in terms of just its performance out of the gate, it's not going to be great, but it is going to be able to game because that's just going to be the requirement for this video, right? The system has to game by itself. And for you guys just kind of taking the first glance at it, you'll probably kind of see some weird stuff going on with it, but I am going to go through each individual part and kind of tell you my reasoning behind picking it and kind of give you guys some separate options to what you guys could go for if you are really going to build a gaming PC right now and you just kind of need it, or if you just really want one and you just want to plan on upgrading it later down the line when graphics cards get a little bit better and just kind of overall inventory gets better in the PC market. Before we get into any of that kind of stuff, make sure that if you do end up watching this video and enjoying it, please leave a like. It really helps me out as a content creator. And if you guys want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. All right, so let's kind of work our way down. So the CPU is probably going to be an area where most people can kind of decide how much money they want to spend on. So I kind of want to stick to Intel 10th gen right now, just because Ryzen in general is a little bit more scarce and the pricing is a little bit worse for them. And Intel 10th gen is actually pretty good compared to Ryzen. You get hyper-threading on every single CPU within the lineup, so it kind of depends on what your price range is. If you don't really need anything that beefy, I'd probably go with the i3-10100, but if you want a little bit more multi-core performance, you can go with the i5-10400F. All of these are in pretty good availability across the board, so when you kind of go and just kind of select your CPU, again, just kind of keep in mind what you want, what kind of performance you want, and how much you're willing to spend. But the i3-10100 is a 4-core 8-thread CPU. It's got an integrated GPU into it, so you can kind of use that for troubleshooting and stuff like that, or if you just don't want to use a GPU until you can actually buy one, you still will get a display out with this particular one, and it actually has some pretty decent frequencies and single core performance, so when you do get a GPU for it, it should be able to game, though I probably would suggest getting a higher end CPU. Now when it comes to the CPU cooler, for this one you can use a stock cooler, but if you're using like a K variant CPU or any of the higher end like i7s or i9s, I'd probably suggest going with a CPU cooler. You can go with an AIO or a tower cooler. Again, it just kind of depends on what you want to go for and what kind of performance you want. Again, like going with a 120mm AIO probably might not be the best thing if you're going with a higher end one, because they'll usually have around the same performance as like a nice tower cooler like this Noctua one. So again, it just kind of depends on what you want. You have to probably do your research when it comes to your tower coolers that you want to use, and that's kind of why I'm leaving that area open. But this one does come with its own cooler, so you guys can just use that one if you really don't feel like you need to buy an entirely separate one. Now this motherboard is one that I pretty strongly recommend to most people. I think it looks pretty nice, but it also has a lot of the feature set that I think a lot of people would want. So when it comes to front I/O, you get a front USB-C header, you get a USB 2.0 header, you get a bunch of SATA ports. I think you get 4 right here and 2 down here. You're getting a good amount of M.2 drive storage, so you get a M.2 drive right here and right here. And then if you want to add a wireless card, you can also add that in there. As well, you have a supported bracket, so it's going to be metal plated on the side to help with any GPU sag if you get a higher end one, and the VRMs actually look like they're cooled pretty decently, but again, that doesn't really matter too much considering this is a B460 board, so you're not gonna be able to overclock on it, and if you do want to overclock, again, you can probably spend a little bit more, but I think for $120 this board has a lot of features that a lot of people would want. And so considering with all that kind of stuff, I'd probably just go with this if you're not looking to spend anything more than $120, but I probably wouldn't go any less than that, because you're really going to be missing out on a lot of the main feature sets that a lot of these boards have, and again, it gives you a lot of upgradability and expandability as you kind of work through it in its lifespan. Now when it comes to memory, I chose the Team T-Force Vulcan Z 16 gigs, which I think is probably the minimum most people should have in their system when they kind of first start out. 16 gigs is really just going to give you enough to have most games open and then have other applications open in the background as well without really feeling any kind of system lag. As well, these are CL16 modules, so the latency latency is going to be pretty low on it, and the memory speed is at 3000 megahertz, so it's basically right around where the limit is for these boards. And for those of you guys who don't know, Intel blocks any XMP profile on these B series motherboards higher than 2933 megahertz. So getting anything higher than 3000 megahertz memory really wouldn't help you out too much, just because Intel will artificially block your ability to use any sort of XMP profile to increase its memory speeds. Again, something that I don't really like, and you might want to switch to Ryzen if you can get a pretty decent deal with a pretty decent motherboard. But again, as of right now, the CPUs that Intel's offering are pretty good pricing to pretty good performance. So when it comes to drives, again, you can kind of pick out what you want, what kind of storage you need, but this is usually just kind of the default thing that I go with. If you want an M.2 drive, you can get one of those, but usually these SATA SSDs will perform pretty close when it just comes to gaming performance. The load times between an M.2 and a SATA SSD are usually pretty much the same, but if you're doing any stuff like video editing or you're just transferring files all the time, then you might see a pretty good performance increase by just getting an M.2 SSD instead of getting a SATA one. But as of right now, I think this Crucial SSD is good for the money. It's $54 for half a terabyte. So I definitely think that's good. And then just for bulk storage, I just threw in a Seagate Barracuda. Again, if you don't really want that as a drive, you can kind of swap that out for maybe a different SSD or maybe just a different brand of hard drives. Again, it's just kind of up to your preference for what is in here, and I'm just kind of giving you guys a baseline of what you should kind of pick. All right, so this part, the RX 570, so that's the card that we picked for our graphics card. I basically specified it as a used graphics card. We're planning on getting this off of eBay. I'm just kind of using basic eBay pricing here. So you can basically find one for around $200 if you can, get the bids right for it. And you could probably get it for less if you wanted to. But around $200 is what the market going price is for a used RX 570. And as of right now, I think that's a bit high considering I used to be able to get one for $130 new. But again, that's just kind of how the market is right now. But the RX 570 will be able to play games at pretty decent frame rates. You have 4 gigs of VRAM, so again, if you're playing anything, maybe like Call of Duty or something like that that requires a lot of VRAM storage, you might kind of see some performance penalties when it comes to that, but when it comes to most games in general, you're really not going to see a huge issue with the RX 570. I think it's a great card for most beginners to kind of get into with, and just to kind of speak on the used aspect of this, I know people are probably hesitant of buying a used card in general, but when it comes to eBay, as long as you kind of do your research and look at the card itself and make sure you read every single thing that the person is listing within these listings, you can't really get scammed, mostly because there is that eBay buyer protection thing. So if you don't get the exact description of what the card is, so if it says that it's working and it doesn't work when it gets to you, then you are protected by eBay's money back guarantee. So that's kind of nice. And as well, I think it's a pretty easy card to get, considering miners can't really use these anymore because it only has 4 gigs of RAM, so a lot of them are probably just selling them off. I don't think mining cards are any worse than any other card. I mean, they were being used for a long period of time pretty hard, but again, usually miners will underclock them and they really don't get too high in terms of temps when you're mining on any of these sorts of cards. So yeah, again, just kind of do your due diligence, look through these different cards, make sure that they are what you want, kind of do your research about the different models and stuff like that, and try to get in some bids, try to see if you can get ones for less than $200. And if you can get one for less than $200, that's a pretty good deal, but that's usually the average going rate is what I'm seeing these cards go for. Now, when it comes to the case, again, this is kind of where you have a choice. The case is more of an aesthetic thing for a lot of people, but if you want performance and for a pretty decent price, the Phanteks Eclipse Mesh is a pretty good case. This is entirely a mesh front panel at the front, so you're going to have a pretty good amount of airflow through the system. It comes with, I think, 1 intake and 1 exhaust fan as well. You're not having those like stupid little punch out PCIe slot covers. They're actually screwed in. So they didn't really cheap out on that. Now, in terms of cable management, I don't think that this thing does anything great, but I don't think it's anything horrendous. So again, it's just kind of what you want. You can go with a different case if you want to, but again, when it comes to performance, I think this case is super good for price to performance and with the amount of airflow that you can get through this system. Now for power supply, Again, you might have a little bit of leniency depending on what you're considering upgrading the system to, but the reason why I put in a fairly beefy power supply is just kind of to future-proof you when you are going to upgrade the system later on and down the line. So again, an RX 570 is not going to need a 700 watt power supply. It's not going to really even come close to using that sort of power, and same thing with an i3. But when you start getting up into like the higher end i9s and maybe even the 11th gen i9s, those things are going to be pretty big power hogs. And if you start using like any of the higher end Ampere cards, so maybe if you get an RTX 3080 or maybe a 3070 and you overclock it a lot, it might come close to getting to what this power requirement is, with still a good amount of headroom. This is also a gold certified power supply, so its efficiency rating is going to be pretty good. And from what I've heard, these power supplies are usually pretty decent quality. It is fully modular, so you can make sure that there's a little bit better cable management in the system as well. And then something that I see a lot of people who do these kind of PC part picker build list videos leave out. They usually don't really talk about the Windows 10 Pro key. Usually they'll just kind of put in the default one for $100, but I've never paid anywhere close to that price for a Windows 10 key. I usually get mine off of eBay, though again, sometimes there are scams out there. I have bought ones where like these ones, sometimes they do work. I haven't been scammed at all off of any ones like these. Again, just make sure that the people have a lot of purchases from them. But again, sometimes like these ones will be legit. I've purchased, I know I've kind of taken the risk with some of these ones before. It's $5. But again, you know, spending $5 and maybe wasting it compared to spending the $100 on a actual Windows 10 Pro key. But again, I'd probably just advise that you can probably get it by some other means or just not use it in general. You don't need a Windows 10 Pro key in order to use Windows 10. You can install it without one. But yeah, this is kind of something I want to load in here. This will kind of be around $820 if you get this entire system yourself. Now I will be linking this down in the description if you guys want to go check it out for yourself, and then just kind of edit things around based on what you guys would need. But again, this is just kind of the base template for what someone should probably consider doing if they really want to buy a gaming PC right now and then kind of wait to upgrade later down the line. So again, thank you guys for watching the video. I hope this was helpful. And if you guys did find it helpful, make sure to leave a like. And if you guys want to watch more, hit that subscribe button. We stream almost every weekend, so if you guys want to come in and ask me questions live or just kind of sit down and talk with chat, it's a great place to go and hang out. We also have a channel Discord. We do help tickets and stuff like that. So if you guys are at all interested in helping other people or just you have a problem that you need help with, go and check out the Discord. It's a great community, and we'll always be glad to have new members. So thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.